Hi guys, you're welcome back. How you doing? I hope you're having a blast. Today we are looking at chapter 4 of our favorite book, Stigma, written by Samson or Shobayo. In chapter 4, Nkiru made up her mind to reveal her HIV status to her family. And so the following weekend, she went home despite Tiwa's effort to get her to stay for a party that weekend. Nkiru knew that the sooner she told her family, the sooner she could continue her lifestyle. When Nkiru got home, nobody was at home, but her younger brother Kelechi was the first to return home. He was 3 years younger than Nkiru. He had just finished his secondary school and was waiting for admission into the university. He was an ardent football lover. When he saw his sister at home, he was overjoyed. Sadly, he noticed that Nkiru was unusually sad and withdrawn, and so he probed her for an answer, and she disclosed the cause of her sadness, which was that she was HIV positive. To make her feel better, Kelechi assured her that having the disease was not a death sentence. He gave her the example of the famous basketballer named Magic Johnson, who has had the disease for decades now, but is still alive and healthy. Kelechi succeeded in cheering Nkiru up. She even made lunch for him. She was very grateful that she had family support. She prepared ofowere and fufu for herself and her brother. Later that evening, her mother returned from the market, and not long after, her father returned too. After dinner, the family sat down to watch the television, but Nkiru was itching to talk to her father. She did not want to talk to her mother because of her impatient and inconsiderate nature. Kelechi helped her to excuse their father from the sitting room, and Nkiru seized that opportunity and followed her father to the room where she broke the unfortunate news to him. Her father was surprisingly well composed. He took the news in good stride. After a very long silence, he asked her if she had done a CD40 cell count. Nkiru did not know what that means, and she told her father so. Her father educated her on what CD40 cells means. They are the white blood cells that helps the body to fight infections and diseases. When HIV gets into the body, it attaches itself to the CD40 cells and uses the DNA of the cell to replicate itself inside the cells. As soon as the new virus breaks out of the CD40 cell, the cell dies. The new virus then attaches and enters another cell, replicates itself again, emerges and kills off the new cell. And so, this is how the process continues until the patient has no more CD40 cells left. Millions of new virus particles are made every day in CD40 cells. Millions of CD40 cells die each year. To counter the virus's destruction, the body continues to make new CD40 cells each day. However, over time, the virus will win, and the CD40 cells will reduce so much that the immune system of the patient becomes very weak, and the patient then develops opportunistic infections. Opportunistic infections are diseases that begin to thrive in the body because the white blood cells cannot fight them anymore due to the presence of HIV. Examples of opportunistic infections are tuberculosis, pneumonia, oral thrush, etc. Mr. Okechukwu did his best to educate his daughter about how the virus works, when to begin medication, and how she can live a better life so as to optimize her health. He was truly encouraging and supportive. Her father promised to take her to a lab the next day so that her white blood cell can be counted. Nkiru was very relieved. That same night, Mr. Okechukwu broke the news to Mrs. Okechukwu, his wife, but her hysterical reaction forced him to stop any other attempt to discuss the issue further. Mrs. Okechukwu was highly devastated by this news. Nkiru was able to have a peaceful sleep that night after suffering many days of sleepless nights. But her peace was short-lived because the next morning, her mother humiliated her with very harsh words because of her status. Her actions brought Nkiru to tears, but thankfully, her father and brother were there to comfort her. After breakfast, her father took her to the lab for the test. Luckily, the result of the test showed that she had more than 700 cell counts per cubic millimeter of blood. This was a very high score, and it showed that her white blood cells were still intact. This made Mr. Okechukwu very happy. He plans to monitor his daughter closely and return her to the lab after 6 months to run the same test. By the time Nkiru and her father returned home, Adanna, her elder sister, was already at home to scold Nkiru for being so careless as to contract HIV. But Nkiru did not hesitate to advise her to go for a test first to confirm her status before she could have any moral grounds to scold her. To this, Adanna took offense. But Nkiru left her there, puzzled, to enter her room while Kelechi wondered why his two sisters never got along. We have come to the end of chapter 4. Now we are going to be taking some comprehension questions, after which we will swing into the significance of these events. Remember that you can pause the video to be able to answer the questions in the comprehension slide. Now let's look at the significance of the events of chapter 4. First, we learned that daughters can be very close to their fathers. The general belief is that fathers are not usually close to their children, especially the female children. But we can see from Nkiru's interaction with her father that some fathers actually have a very strong relationship with their daughters. Again, some fathers are patient and caring. We would expect fathers to be harsh and not understanding. We would expect them not to be patient. We would expect them to flare up immediately they get such a news. But Mr. Okechukwu was an exception. He was a one-in-a-million father who was tempered, who was patient with his daughter. He was compassionate towards her. He wanted to know how he could help her. He stepped into the shoes and he closed the gap for her. He stood in there for her and held her up high. And that gave Nkiru a lot of comfort. This is how children feel when their fathers are solidly behind them. Another thing we can get from chapter 4 is that there are mothers that are not compassionate. Mrs. Okechukwu is obviously not a compassionate mother. You remember that Nkiru hesitated. She was highly skeptical as to whether she should involve her mother in her predicament because she already knew that her mother was not an easy meat to chew. And so there are mothers that make it very difficult for their children to discuss issues with them. And so through the events of chapter 4, we can see that there are mothers who are really at the root of their children's issues. Fourthly, this chapter 4 helped us to know that having kind family members is a real treasure. Kelechi is highly compassionate. He has empathy. He is very caring. At every point, he holds his sister up, same as her father. And that support she has gotten from her brother and her father have given her, a kind of edge. It has given her a push. It has given her a pillar and a platform to hold on to. Their support gives her a lot of strength to carry on. So it is really crucial that family members are indeed very kind to one another. It helps each member of the family. Finally, this chapter 4 helped us to understand that education is priceless. Why do I say so? Kelechi knows a lot about HIV/AIDS. So does his father, Mr. Okechukwu. And because of how much they know about this disease, they were able to offer comfort and solace to their sister and daughter. So education is a real important aspect of life. It is good for one to know a little bit of everything so that in situations like this, one can be very helpful. Now, we have come to the end of looking at the significance of the events. We are now going to look at the literary devices that Mr. Samson used in his chapter 4. To help us understand the state of mind of Nkiru, Mr. Samson used imagery to tell us how lonely she was. When she got to her home, Kelechi was the first person that came back, and Kelechi noted that her bag was just beside her, sitting there beside her. It created the imagery of someone whose bag was keeping her company. That is to tell you that all humans have failed her, at least at that point. All humans have failed her, and now she had to resort to inanimate things for comfort and solace. Another literary device that Mr. Samson used there is the idiom. When her brother Kelechi says curiosity is killing the cat, that is an idiom, a very popular idiom. That means that if she didn't tell him immediately what was making her sober, it would cause him to become anxious. And I'm sure nobody wants their brother to be anxious. There are other literary devices that can be found in chapter 4. These are the key ones. And I hope you enjoyed this session with me. In our next session, we're going to be looking at chapter 5. Please do well to check in and have a lovely time. Bye.